This episode is brought to you by Amazon Video Games. Visit bit.ly/Amazon Backlog Battle, all one word, when you buy anything from Amazon so we can continue offering our back catalog of shows.
This is the Backlog Battle Podcast, episode 176.
They just have a lot of protein.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Backlog Battle Podcast. This is Alex.
And this is Anthony.
What's going on?
It's going on. We're finally here, man.
Finally, where?
Persona 5 spoiler cast. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh,
Play
yeah.
dumb.
Well,
Don't play dumb.
I mean, we are here. I mean, I'm like, what physically? I don't know. My mind is kind of like at a, standstill right now because we're doing this in the morning and I'm not a morning person, but Anthony is like, we got to do this in the morning. I'm like, all right. I don't even drink coffee. I don't drink coffee. I don't have coffee. I had my oatmeal. I had my almond milk, which, is actually good fiber. Apparently.
Yeah.
It's actually really good.
I don't like almond milk, dude.
Really?
Fuck up.
Well, okay. So it's vanilla almond milk. So it's not like just almond milk. It's actually flavored vanilla, which I love vanilla, like as a flavoring. So I don't know about you.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
You know what the best way to have almonds is? Blue Diamond, the brand?
Sure.
They make these bomb wasabi soy sauce almonds.
Ugh, I hate wasabi.
Good.
I hate
Oh,
wasabi.
God damn it. I love wasabi, dude.
I
love it.
I have like no tolerance for like spicy stuff. Yeah.
I'm Mexican, so.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I guess it's kind of expected. But so I mean, how's things? Like, how are you feeling after defeating Persona 5? By the way, the first part of this show is not going to be the spoiler cast. The second part of the show is going to be the spoiler cast because I know, it's our duty. I don't know if you agree with this, Anthony, of course. It's our duty to kind of provide you guys with a good, entertaining show, that everybody can actually are able to listen to, because I know some of you guys are actually like still playing through Persona 5, taking your sweet time, which is totally cool.
Because I did.
because he sure did. And, it is what it is. So yeah, like how are you feeling after that whole thing?
I really don't think I can go into it now.
Wow.
Say,
okay.
I'll say this. My top 10 games of all time is changing again, though. We'll leave it at that.
Okay.
And you know the last time that happened was, I don't know, a while back, so.
It did. And, just to kind of clarify, both of us are going to actually be reviewing the game like right after or during the spoiler cast, because I think that that's kind of fair to be able to talk about a game openly. So, if you guys want to listen to that, obviously, like sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of the show, and then we'll tell you guys when that's going to happen. But for now, we're going to be starting the show with something really brand new because Anthony actually like kind of brought it up as kind of like a cool way to get, an idea for you guys to get an idea of what the community is thinking when it comes to like video games and stuff. Do you want to talk about a little bit about this? Because I mean, I'm not that good with talking about this sort of community stuff.
Okay, so I kind of just posted a question to the community, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the question was, what obscure arcade games do you enjoy? And I chose obscure because we've talked about this a million times on the show, but I think it's important to reiterate that arcade games, older arcade games, there's a lot of these arcade games that were never ported to consoles, right?
Right.
And the only way they exist now is because of MAME. And whether you feel badly about emulation or not, the fact of the matter is MAME has preserved a lot of games that would have been lost.
Right.
And there's a lot of obscure arcade games that I have enjoyed, you know, in the last nearly 20 years since I got into MAME. And I've discovered some ones that I never got to play in the arcades. Because remember, the other thing about arcades too, even back then, was your arcade may have gotten Final Fight, but your buddies in the next town over may not have gotten it. Now, Final Fight might be a bad example because that game's been fucking ported. But regardless, you know, there's a lot of old arcade games that just didn't make it, you know?
Right.
So there's that, the end of that, I guess. But yeah, so I asked, you know, there's a lot of people in the forums. So I asked everyone what their favorite obscure arcade game. Of course, Alex, being the smartass he is, said Street Fighter 2 World Warrior. You know, that's the rarest. That game has never been ported, and you know, it's as obscure as Polybius, which someone actually mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
You know about Polybius, right?
Oh no, actually, like, what is it?
You don't know about Polybius?
No.
Holy shit. Okay, so this is an urban legend, one of the video game urban legends, kind of like the Pokemon music that makes you die or whatever. There was an arcade in, I think, Portland, in fact, where you live. I think it was Portland, back in the 80s. And you might want to ask your girlfriend if she's heard of this. Is back in the 80s, during the golden age, 81, 82, some around that time, there was reports of this mysterious arcade game that was placed there, right? And the rumor has it is that the game played like Tempest. You've played Tempest, right?
Sure.
So you got an idea of how it plays, like a Vectra.
Right.
What was it? Vectra graphics or whatever the fuck it was called?
Vectrex?
Line graphics? Vectrex? Yeah,
no,
that type of stuff.
I mean, vector graphics. I think you're right.
Vector graphics. Yeah. Vector graphics. So the thing is with Polybius was people would play it and people would throw up and get sick, or they would lose a little bit of their sanity. It was just this fucked up game. But the legend didn't end there. Every so often, 3 men in black suits, men in black literally, would go into the arcade and take the data. And the rumor was that Polybius was a government experiment testing your psychology and shit. And this is an actual urban legend. I'm surprised you did not hear about this.
I didn't.
So yeah, that's Polybius. Now, the thing that makes Polybius not so credible is that it started getting mentioning when the internet happened. Now, of course, it could be also plausible for its existence because not a lot of people had the communication that we do now prior to the internet exploding, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest thing was, I think in like 06 or some shit like that, on Reddit, someone claimed that they were the creator of Polybius. And there was even a mocked version of Polybius of what it could have been.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, those stories haven't been validated. There are people who have said they've gone into that arcade and they don't remember it. So who the fuck knows? Right. I'm kind of in the camp of, I'm in the skepticism camp of it, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm surprised you never heard of Polybius.
I'm actually looking it up on Snopes because that's actually a very reliable place for fact checking. And this is what it reads. No arcade game called Polybius induced amnesia, caused gamers to wake up screaming in the middle of the night, or attracted the attention of mysterious quote-unquote men in black who periodically came to quote-unquote collect records from Portland area machines. This one is just a gag someone invented several years ago, which has now become enshrined on the web. Another version of the conspiracy rumors involving military intelligence agents visiting arcades to collect stored information from game consoles, which date to at least the early 1980s. Parentheses. Back then, we were supposed to watch out for men in black who came around to take down the initials of high scorers in Space Invaders, Asteroids, and Defender.
The fuck?
Yeah, so basically, like, Polybius is just the modern interpretation of all those, all those like urban legends and stuff, which, of course, we all know that led to the eventual creation. Like, I feel like all of these urban legends led to the eventual creation of the movie The Last Starfighter. Because if you remember, that's kind of like what happened in that movie.
Yeah. except it was an extraterrestrial.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, it was the same thing. Who could be the best space jockey to save us from the bad guys?
And you know what else is funny, Anthony? So like just like the like most arcade games at the time, the Last Starfighter arcade machine actually allowed you to put in 3 initials, and it's funny because the main character's name is Alex, and he put in ALX, and ever since then I'm like, that's actually a pretty clever way of putting your entire name there without actually putting in the vowel. So I actually started using those initials.
Oh, damn!
True story.
I really like that movie.
I haven't seen it since I was young, so I can't tell.
I got it as a gift for my birthday back in 2006, and I don't watch DVDs much, but it's one of the few I own because I go digital, and I really like it. It's a fun movie. It's cheese. It's 80s cheese, but it's kind of that. It's got that feel of films like The Goonies or Gremlins or Back to the Future, and it's not as well known. But the thing about 80s movies, and I'm not one of these nostalgia guys say you 80s movies are unique. I think every decade, has their own uniqueness in movies. I think you can agree that. But the thing that made the 80s unique in its own way was they had these comedy fantasies that were grounded, but they weren't grounded. You know what I mean? Like the well, not Ghostbuster, but you know what I mean.
Right.
And I think that's what made the 80s the way it was. And I think that's why Stranger Things was such a hit last year, too. So.
Right. That's it.
So there's that.
I totally agree with that. It's a product of their time, right? Pretty much. Yeah.
Oh, man, I could write a story about Polybius with kids riding bikes with headlights and shit.
That's
you know
crazy.
What I mean?
Yeah. So, okay.
I should.
You should. But not to interrupt you though, I am kind of curious about like Dungeon Magic because you mentioned that as your pick, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Dungeon Magic is a fantasy brawler, and when you think of fantasy brawlers, you think of King of Dragons or King Arthur, or of course the best one, Dungeons and Dragons,
or Dragon's Crown. Yeah.
Dragon's Crown or Golden Axe, But what was interesting about Dungeon Magic was that Dungeon Magic was, first and foremost, the view of it. It was isometric. Okay? Isometric. And I don't know, have you looked up Dungeon Magic at all?
No, I haven't actually.
So with Dungeon Magic, it had a bit of a isometric view, right?
Yeah, I see that. I'm kind of curious, like how did that work?
You would move around the field, and it's been a little while since I played it, but I think there was a jump button, right?
Okay.
But what I think Dungeon Magic did that was unique from even say Dungeons and Dragons and such, and I'm not diminishing Dungeons and Dragons by any means, those arcade games, is it did feel a little bit more of a dungeon crawl than a lot of these other brawlers did because of that isometric view.
I see.
But the big difference was it moved with the speed and tenacity of a brawler. So, I love dungeon crawlers, but there are times when some of them drag. We can agree on that, right?
Yeah.
And this one never felt like it dragged, but it still had a dungeon crawling feel. Now, the story, there's not much of a story. Some princess gets kidnapped by an evil dark wizard or some crap. And
as one to do in the 80s, I guess.
Yeah, 80s. Now, I will tell you this about Dungeon Magic. I don't know if this is a successor, but I know it's related because it had the same developers. There is a game called Dungeon Magic on the NES that uses the same characters. But the big difference is this is an actual dungeon crawler in the vein of Might and Magic or the Gold Box Dungeons and Dragons games or, stuff like that, or Ultima or things like that. So there is an actual traditional dungeon crawler called Dungeon Magic on the NES.
Okay, that's interesting.
And it uses the same main character, like the male character, because there's you can play as different ones. There's like a wizard, there's a scantily clad elf, which I like to use, obviously. And of course the, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed anime hero,
So I mean, it sounds like the NES game was compromised just because they couldn't bring that full experience to like an 8-bit system,
I'll be honest, I don't know, because I actually think the NES game predates.
That's weird.
Yeah, predates the arcade game.
Okay. So
there's that. So I don't know. It's interesting, but going back to Dungeon Magic, each character, one thing it does carry over from these other dungeon, these fantasy brawlers, is each character has their differences, right?
Right.
Like I'm thinking of Golden Axe for some reason. Remember Flair, the barbarian woman?
Mm-hmm.
She had the strongest magic and was faster and such. But the dwarf had the weakest magic, but he was the heaviest hitter,
Mm-hmm.
So like the elf girl, she was a little more spry, and the I think there was like a brawler character, and I don't know. I like Dungeon Magic, and I think it's something that I think actually, and I'm not gonna like say, Alex, you have to play Dungeon Magic now. But if you do want to like look for stuff on MAME to play one of these days, if you're ever super bored, Dungeon Magic, I think you would dig.
Okay, that's cool.
I think you'd like, because you are a fan of the fantasy brawler, right?
Yeah. I feel like I need to carve some time for it though, because I tried getting my girlfriend into Dragon's Crown and then she just lost interest. Because I mean, be quite honest, like most brawlers don't have a lot of engaging stories anyway. And I feel like, while Dragon's Crown is like a spiritual successor to the Dungeons and Dragons games, I feel like the Dungeons and Dragons games that Capcom made are still a little bit more engaging because of the pacing is a lot faster, Well,
yeah, you got to consider I'm 26 hours into Dragon's Crown, and I love the game, don't get me wrong, but it's a game that I've had since 2013. I'll revisit it for a while and then go back to it and then leave and then revisit it. I love the game. I think it's great. I would love to see more brawlers, but I do think it might be a tad bit too long.
Too repetitive, I think, because some of the missions and stuff are just kind of like, all right, this is a harder version of the same, and honestly, that's kind of like personally how I feel about most of Vanillaware's games, kind of, in a way, because of their focus on the artwork and stuff, it kind of reminds me of old school Square, except of course in a much more smaller scale. Like they spend so much time on artwork and all that stuff that sometimes, like, in order to kind of prolong the gameplay, they'll start revisiting old areas and you'll backtrack. And I mean, that happened in Muramasa, like it'd be like, oh, we're going back to this, and I'm like, how many forests do I have to fucking cross in order to get to like where I'm going,
I'll be honest, and I didn't complete it, and I'm thinking going back to it eventually. Maybe after The Witcher 3, or no, after Batman, because I told you I was going to do Batman Telltale next.
Okay.
But Odin Sphere, from what I remember, it was paced pretty briskly.
Mm-hmm.
From what I played of it last year.
Okay.
Because I beat, it's 5. From what I understand, there's 5 different perspectives of the same story, and I remember I beat the first one, the Valkyrie, and then there's the little rabbit fucker, and there's that, and I was already like halfway done, so they move quickly, and and the alternate endings actually determine on who you choose to fight the different 5 final bosses. So there's no backtracking or anything like that in Odin Sphere.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. So I think Odin Sphere might be their best paced game.
Okay. And that's funny because like that's the first one. I feel like that's one of the first ones that Atlas actually published. That's funny.
Yeah. I don't know.
So, okay, so let's kind of hammer through like some of the responses to the community. So Ronnie is the one responsible for that Polybius reply.
Thanks for the Polybius story, Ronnie.
Yeah. And then William said Rage of the Dragons, which refresh my memory of what this is. Do you know what this is?
I don't know. I'll have to do research. Rage of the Dragons.
Okay. I know what Ryan said. I'm actually familiar with this game, which is Operation Wolf. And, you didn't really clarify the criteria of obscure games, but I feel that Operation Wolf was actually like a popular game because you basically had like a gun. Like that was like one of the first gun games that I ever played with like really good graphics and shit.
I agree.
And also it came out on the NES.
Yeah, it had a port. I should have said games that didn't have ports. Well, Rage of the Dragons, by the way, is a tag team head-to-head fighting game released for the Neo Geo by Playmore, SNK Playmore.
Oh, SNK Playmore, okay.
So here's the thing. If you look at SNK Playmore's library of fighting games, I guarantee you'll find at least like 5 of them you never heard of.
Right, yeah. Because, I mean, that was like a weird era when like Playmore bought SNK. It's really weird.
Yeah, that was around the time of the SNK versus Capcom stuff too.
Right. So
Yeah.
I want to elaborate on Ryan's suggestion of Operation Wolf. Here's an even bigger, more obscure game that, to my knowledge, has not been ported to any other home console. Okay?
Okay.
Operation Thunderbolt, which is the
I've never heard of that.
Oh, really?
No.
Okay, so Operation Thunderbolt is basically a 2-player version of Operation Wolf with new levels and everything. It's from Taito. It's from Taito as well. And, you know, and just like Operation Wolf, you had 2 guns. So basically both of you could do a lot of the shooting and stuff. It was actually really, really fun. I remember playing it in the arcade in the Philippines, and I was just really hooked. Like, there was one arcade that had Operation Wolf, and I'm like, man, it would be cool to be able to play this with a friend. And I went to another arcade and found Operation Thunderbolt, and I'm like, all right, we can play this game until we fucking beat it. We never did.
Hell yeah, that's a way to do it, my friend.
Never beat like arcade games?
Yeah, I did. I remember. Oh fuck, we're gonna really go off on a tangent here, but I remember the first arcade games I beaten were Ninja Turtles, the first arcade game. And I remember, I don't know why, but I got off school that day, and I remember I went in and I started playing. And a lot of people don't know this about me, but I tried to be a very saintly child, which means I did not like cursing.
Okay.
You don't believe this?
I've seen crazier things. I mean, I grew up going.
Okay.
I grew. You have to understand. I grew up going to a Catholic school, and you can't imagine like what happened to everybody right after that.
Oh fuck. Okay.
Come on, yeah.
Anyway, I understand. I get what you're saying now. But let's go back to this, okay? So this kid came in, and I don't know what the fuck happened to him, but I was playing through the game, and he's like, hey, man, let's fucking kick its ass. I think I was like 7 or 8. He was 7 or 8, and he was just cussing up a storm, and he's like, let's kill these motherfucking these foot soldiers and fucking Rocksteady and Bebop. I fucking hate them in the cartoon. And then like 2 other kids came in, and they didn't cuss, but they were like, we were all shocked because this kid was just cursing up a goddamn storm, right?
Wow.
And it was just motherfucking foot soldiers. I hate them in the fucking show, dumb fucking robots. It was just fuck more than I ever did. But we beat the game.
Okay.
And I think we only used a few continues because he was really good. And we were all really good.
Nice. Or the difficulty of the arcade game was just pretty low.
Yeah. People also, too, a common misconception is all arcade games are hard. But what people forget is that there are dip switches and manager settings, and they can lower the difficulty in these games. Arcade managers can. Mm-hmm. They can even set like, here's the crazy part, they can set like 4 credits to 1, no, 4 continues to 1 credit, which is 1/4. So a lot of people forget that about arcade machines. Excuse me, I don't know why I grunted, but
okay.
But I will say this, that's another thing about MAME. You can look at these dip switches. So
yep. And kind of
really cool.
Kind of play around with it, yeah. Okay, so let's barrel through some of these. Chris says Night Slashers.
Okay, that I don't know.
Oh wow, okay. Well, I actually don't know either. Derek says Aqua Rush. Man,
don't know that one either.
Yeah, Ronnie says Revolution X, which I've played. That one's weird, and that also had like a home port as well. It's kind of weird because during the time that Revolution X came out, Aerosmith was kind of like getting popular again, to the degree that Disney gave them their own fucking roller coaster in like the Hollywood studios in Florida. Did you know this? I don't know.
No.
So that one was weird. So it's an indoor roller coaster, kind of like Space Mountain, but instead it actually has like loops and inversions and shit like that. It's kind of crazy.
Okay.
Yeah. And the whole story, and I told you that there are stories in Disney rides, and the story of it was like, yeah, you gotta like basically like drive their stretch limousine, through crazy Los Angeles traffic, which I guess like you go on loops and barrel rolls. I guess that's accurate, right?
I gotcha.
To the concert before they get late. So they're late for their own concert. You have to drive them to their venue. That's
crazy.
That's the story. Yeah, it's kind of
Night Slashers. I looked up.
Okay.
It's 3 like super bulgy anime characters, and it's a horror beat 'em up.
Nice.
And I'm looking at some of the screenshots, and you fight a lot of zombies and demons and vampires, it looks like. Mm-hmm. And in one of the levels, it looks like there's like a barricaded area, and there's a big crowd of people, and it looks like the female character was captured or something. This is my assumption, and she's fighting zombies in it while people watch.
Interesting.
So yeah, that's what it looks like, and it looks like you fight. Some of the bosses look like a Frankenstein-like dude and like a mole monster. It's really campy. Like the horror's done in the vein of like later Castlevania games. You know what I mean?
I see.
Yeah, that kind of campy vein. You know?
Okay.
So that's Night Slashers.
Okay, cool. Let's barrel on through. Matt says Armored Warriors.
I like that game.
Okay.
I like that game.
And last but certainly not least, Jason said Golden Axe, The Revenge of Death Adder, and of course your favorite game, Cybersled.
Both are Cybersled. Yes, it did get a port, but not a very good one, and most people forgot about it.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, most people forgot about it. I think the trouble with Cybersled, because like I said, back in March in an episode back in March, I got to play an actual Cybersled machine, and I can see why experiencing that game is not the easiest thing to do, because the PlayStation port does not do it justice, and that's not on the fault of the PlayStation. It's just the way the arcade game was designed.
Yeah. They're pretty... typically, they have, like, higher memory anyway and all that shit. So.
Yeah. And Golden Axe, The Death of the Revenge of Death Adder, I don't think that was released in the States, and that is considered the best sequel to Golden Axe, because Golden Axe had I don't think it was. Yeah, I remember like one of the characters was like a centaur. The only character that returned was the dwarf.
Mm-hmm.
So I've heard good things about that game.
That's real cool.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know about it too.
Yeah, I actually, I'll probably look it up like right after the show and stuff. But yeah, so those are all the, responses that we got from the question. And in case people want to post more questions or respond to some of the questions that we're posting on the Facebook group, just look for the Backlog Battle Podcast community or Backlog Battle community on Facebook and hit join, and then we'll approve your membership. It's no problem. Like, it's a free membership. You don't need to do anything except, of course, participate with the community. Let's make it the best place to talk about video games, right, Anthony?
Hell yeah.
Yeah, totally.
We are not Game Facts.
We are not Game Facts. All right, so this is the part of the show where we normally would transition to like the to the spoiler cast, but since we actually have a shit ton of questions, we need to actually like address this and stuff, because we need to kind of whittle this down. You know what I mean?
You sent me a picture of your office, and I saw this big old bag of mail just popping out of the seams.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. Yeah. Well, virtual mail, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, it's popping out of the fucking seams. I mean, it's paper cutting the fuck out of that bag. So.
Jesus Christ. Yeah. So I'm gonna basically read this question because I think this is relevant. There's a lot more open world games kind of coming out. So so I just wanted to read this question by Billy. So he writes, since you two talked about open world burnouts and whether or not certain games should go open world, this follow-up should be an interesting topic. It's been revealed, I guess at the time, that Dynasty Warriors 9 is now going open world with its gameplay. What are your thoughts and expectations of Koei Tecmo going in this route? Personally, I'm more open, fun, to this idea, and I would love more Dynasty Warriors. I would love it more come Dynasty Warriors 9 Empires if that version also moves in real time as opposed to turn-based like in previous Empire games.
I did not know about this.
Really?
Yeah. Well, we've talked about this making a shift to maybe games that didn't need a change. Let's be honest. And I know there's a lot of you guys that love your Dynasty Warriors or Samurai Warriors or whatever, right? We have guys that love that, right? But in my honest opinion, that series does need a bit of a shakeup.
Yeah.
I think I remember when I liked that one on Vita and I was telling you where I'm at, you're like, the same fucking story again?
Yeah.
You knew exactly where I was. You're like, you're halfway through the story. I'm like, how do you know this? You never played it. And it's like, because it's the same story in every fucking game.
Right. And it's kind of funny because, like, at the time you mentioned that was like one of your must-buy games on the Vita, which really puzzled me. I was like, how is Dynasty Warriors a must-buy game on the Vita?
I don't know why I said that. That was dumb. Because there's much better must-buy games on the Vita. You know,
Yeah.
Persona 5 Golden.
Persona 4 Golden, you mean?
Persona 4 Golden, yeah.
Okay.
I got Persona on the brain because we're doing a fucking spoiler cast.
Yep.
No, but if you think about it, and I'm not a game designer, but when I heard open world and stuff, you could do a lot of cool things with the way the combat is structured in Dynasty Warriors games with an open world environment. You really could do some really neat, nifty things. One, you can make the scope a lot bigger than it is. You know what I mean?
Right.
Number two, you could, make, maybe, and again, I don't, Koei Tecmo, this is what we're talking about. So maybe I'm being hopeful, but make like, where you fight matters, make it, just stuff like that. You could do a lot with an open world Dynasty Warrior game. And to be quite honest, we talked about how certain games don't need it and certain games do. I don't know if an open world is the right step for a Koei game, but it's good to see that they're moving in a different direction because Dynasty Warriors has been the same for like 20 years.
Yeah,
that's a fact.
Also, like, if you consider like what they're doing with different IPs, right? It's almost as though they took like the Telltale route and said, like, let's just apply our engine on as many licenses as possible and just help other people out. Like fucking Zelda has one. Like Fire Emblem's gonna have one. Fist of the North Star has one. Dragon Quest has one. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, and that all started with the Gundam series.
Berserk.
Like, Berserk also has one. It's kind of like Attack on Titan. It's like, I mean, granted, Attack on Titan was very, very different than most.
Right.
Like, it actually, like, what's really cool about that game is they actually had, like, mimicked the locomotion of those engines, which is really fucking cool. But, it's the same engine that's powering it. That being said, that was like refreshing, right? And I feel like with every single iteration that Omega Force, the developers, have done of the Warriors games, whether it's their IP or not, they've tried to figure out like ways to kind of really change up the Dynasty Warriors gameplay.
Right.
But I'm in agreement with you. I think like it's time for them to really kind of change the pace of the game up, because as cool as they are that they're, using different IPs, like, what's going to happen when they go back to their own? And I think the open world, solution, I guess, that they come up with, I'll be, anticipating what that actually means for the series. And there's going to be a watchful eye there for me. Like, let's put it that way.
Well, if you look at the idea itself and those characters and the mythology it's based on and stuff, you could do a lot with that story.
Right.
You really could do a lot to its story. And if you even change it up to make it into an open world game, you could really explore the lore. Not saying they will, but you could do a lot, And I know there's going to be a lot of traditional Dynasty Warriors fans that are going to be up in arms about this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. I appreciate that you guys like that. That's fine if you just like that. But I think, too many people, myself included, and I know Alex, who has more of a history with the series, is just wanting to see something different from this series. And oftentimes we see series that are, not the best, and something happens, they do a change up and it becomes good. I mean, It changes. Look at Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider was stagnant for years until the reboot. Stagnant. And they really changed it up. So I was never a Tomb Raider fan until this 2013 game. So
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
As far as like other IPs going into open world and stuff, I think that my approach in checking out games that have been long time, one genre, and then they kind of say like they're open world, is I generally approach them with a level of caution, right?
Right.
I exhibited this with Mass Effect Andromeda, and when they said like it's gonna be the largest universe we've ever made. By the way, it's only 9 planets. It's like it's kind of funny. But you know, like I try to go in there with an open mind. Like, you know, I played through and actually beat, you know, Mass Effect Andromeda, for better or for worse, right? And, you know, and I gave them the benefit of the doubt that maybe they had, you know, a good idea. Sadly, the execution like faltered a little bit, but in terms of like, you know, other games, like I feel like that's kind of like where I am at, is that if it makes sense from, you know, from what the series has been, I'll be okay with it, right? Like Final Fantasy 15, I was actually really okay with it being open world. It's so sad that the later half of the game isn't, but you know, like I still enjoyed my time with the open world.
I did as well.
Yeah. And as far as, you know, as far as like IPs that I think will go open world, you know, which, you know, that wasn't part of the question. There's plenty to kind of, you know, reap there, right? And so like, even, you know, you could even say like Pokemon could go open world, you know, like even though it already is to some degree, right?
Right.
And, you know, it's just a matter of execution at the end of the day. If they do it extremely well, you know, and they basically aren't just making open world for open world's sake by making like menial tasks, you know, for you to do just to give experience, which, you know, by the way, that's like fucking World of Warcraft circa version 1 kind of quest design, you know. We're way past that. We're at the level of like Witcher 3 now. I think, you know, we're gonna, you know, like I feel like there's a lot more careful creation going on. A good recent example is actually Horizon Zero Dawn. A lot of the quests there are actually super fun to do just for the fuck of just doing the quest, because of the quest variety, right? Like, you know, there are bandit camps all over the place and you have to like, you know, infiltrate them and stuff, or do stealth, or basically create havoc. It's kind of crazy. There is a story that ties everything together, but you know, in that sense, sometimes it's secondary, because you're just like, yeah, I want to fucking liberate this entire, like, you know, bandit camp and make it, you know, take it back for the people, you know, like, and it doesn't take much to make compelling, even side content for open world games, because open world games really, like, it's going to be measured by two things, right? The quality of the gameplay in the main story and the quality of the gameplay and the side questing, you know?
And I think that's where a lot of them falter, is side quests.
Yeah.
A lot of open world game. That's the biggest weakness. And I think, you know, we always kind of knew that, but I think The Witcher 3 like fucking slapped us in the face and said, yeah, they have never really done these right.
Right. You're right.
Yeah.
It's really definitive. Like the way that when The Witcher 3 just came out, it's just like, bam, here's how you do side quests. And I feel like that's actually why we didn't get like a new Elder Scrolls or a Fallout release this year, because after they released Fallout 4, you know, it was disappointing because a lot of people said like, oh, it's just like Fallout 3. Well, what do you mean by that? And people couldn't articulate why it was just basically Fallout 4, you know, but it was basically like Fallout 4 was just basically Fallout 3, but it really is because of the side quest design. It really wasn't. Well, if you
no, I agree.
But if you really think about like what people were complaining about, it wasn't that, you know, what did they mean by that, right? Like, what did it mean that this is just more Fallout 3, right? What they really mean is like that while it also feels like Fallout 3, it didn't really differentiate itself enough in order to make it, you know, feel like a meaningful experience. Which also means, by the way, that the story of the game, or whatever remnants of it, was so samey that it might as well have been Fallout 3. You get what I'm saying?
I agree, because I played Fallout 4 and you played Fallout 4, and you know, it's, look, for what it is, it's not bad. Okay, let's get that straight. I mean, it's a Bethesda game, but I've kind of gotten bored of them, and I think one of the reasons is the world feels empty in Fallout 4. You know, and I don't mean empty because there's a lot of NPCs and stuff, but I think what's missing there is those little layers that say The Witcher 3 has. You know what I mean?
But also, I feel like the story is the one that helps tie it together, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's the one that pulls everything together. It's the glue, right?
Exactly. And the story has a sense of urgency to it, but the sense of urgency is lost because it's like, I have to save my baby. I'm a parent. I would go after my fucking baby. I wouldn't stop and at the fucking casino to get a super armor suit so I could kill super mutants to clear out the sewers so I could get money. Does that make sense?
Yeah. One of the things that I'm going to bring up Final Fantasy 14. One of the things that I love about Final Fantasy 14 is that most of the side quests actually give you information about the lore, and sometimes they'll identify you as the Warrior of Light. So that way, it kind of brings in that whole feeling of like, yeah, I recognize who you are. You did a lot of badass shit. Like, you beat Ultima Weapon. You beat this. You beat Ifrit. You beat Shiva and all that stuff, like, you're a big deal. In Stormblood, one of the things that they really did that was really actually fucking cool is that the side quests are actually, there's actually not a lot of side quests in the game anymore. So as because in previous versions of Final Fantasy 14, you'd have layers upon layers upon layers of like the same side quest. But what they did was they added more experience points to the main storyline, so people would pursue it more, and added more experience points towards the class/job quests, so that you can learn a bit more about the lore of your class. And I thought that was actually a really cool addition because it shows that the developers are saying like, yeah, these two things that you should be paying attention to, you really should be paying attention to because they're really super fucking important.
Paying attention, Alex?
Paying attention.
I'm just giving you shit.
I know. But yeah, that's a good example. Like, that's a good example of an open world design that actually works really well, especially for the narrative. And man, at some point, I don't know, like at some point it'll be funny that we get like a spoiler cast with you beating Heavensward in the far, far future. It would be hilarious.
We'll see
when that happens.
We'll see. Right now, though, man, I am in my backlog battle, and I am fighting my mortal nemesis in that backlog battle now that I beat Persona 5.
Which is The Witcher 3?
The Witcher 3, that motherfucker. I love that game, but it's been haunting me for 2 years, and I mean main quest. I don't care about Blood and Sand or that other one. What the fuck, Blood and Wine. Fuck, I'm thinking that shitty Spartacus show from a couple years back.
Wow.
You remember that show? That was bad.
Yeah.
It was silly.
Horrible, yeah.
Oh, fuck. But anyway, that game is gonna go down.
All right.
It's going to go down
this year?
In the next, I hope, couple weeks. And you know where I'm at, so I'm getting close. I'm getting close to it, though.
Wow.
You even told me yesterday I'm getting close.
You are getting close.
I'm getting close.
You're getting there.
I'm getting there.
Maybe.
Fuck your team. Let's talk about Persona 5. Something that I did beat after 2 months.
So, all right. So this is the part where we're going to basically say goodbye to people who actually have not beat or played Persona 5 or are yet to plan to play Persona 5 or yet to get it. So, in that case, thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you guys next week. For the people who want to listen to the Persona 5 spoiler cast and our actual spoilerific review of the game, which let's not mince words here. It's gonna get a good rating, right? Like, so if you guys are even curious about that, you guys are gonna know that we're gonna give this a good rating. So in any case, let's just jump right into Persona 5. So Anthony, I know you have the penchant to kind of just jump around in topics and stuff like that, but I will ask you one important question, because this is something that me and my girlfriend have been teasing you this whole time, because you wouldn't know this until the very end.
Yeah.
What did you think of the plot twist about Igor actually not being Igor? Because you were you were like the whole time you were like, "Fuck this voice actor! I can't seem to get into it."
Let me get there. That complaint's completely out the window. That complaint is completely out the window. It is completely out the fucking window, because I like the little "I'm Igor," that kind of gravelly little voice. And when I played the game, I was like, "Damn, they made him deep." But in the context of the story, that makes sense because it's not Igor.
Well, so you have to realize that there is context to this, right? Because in Japan, for the folks who don't know, the original voice actor of Igor actually passed away. And so, so basically they said that they were going to bring in a brand new voice actor and stuff, and of course had him voice act, as the new Igor. And of course, when people, kind of heard him, Igor included, Anthony included, he was like, what? Like, this doesn't feel right. And of course they made that part of the story, and they've completely hidden that fact this whole time that this Igor is not even Igor, Yeah,
that complaint's out the window. It wasn't even going to hurt my score. if it was really Igor, but now it's, it makes sense. It makes perfect sense why that voice was the voice. Now, I'll be honest, when Igor does come back, I've been playing Persona 3 lately. I do think it is a different actor for Igor.
It is.
It is? Okay. But it sounds like Igor, so I'm cool with the new actor.
Yeah. So let me give another context with you about this. So in the Japanese version of the game, when that Igor does come back, it's actually voice clips from the original voice actor that passed away. And they kind of they basically recycled some of his previous lines from Persona 3 and Persona 4. And that's how they did that.
In the Japanese version.
In the Japanese version. And actually, even in the American version, if you change the voice acting to Japanese, you will hear the original voice actor reprise his role. Right. And I felt like that's kind of, and a lot of people, including myself, like kind of felt that that was actually a really, kind nod to the person who's been Igor this whole time. Like it's as if like his legacy just kind of lives on, in a new generation because, like now it's like, all right, well. It's almost as if, like, in a way, they built that whole Igor twist around that guy's death in some sort of way, and I felt like it actually served the game, like, really well at the end.
Yeah, I agree. I think it fit. It fits now. That's my. I only had 2 complaints when we did the original spoiler cast, which was that and the other one, and this Igor one stayed until the end, of course. Right. So that's no longer a complaint. The other one I still have, though, a little bit, and that's the I still think, and it's not bad, but the camera angles can be a little wonky from time to time, especially when you're hiding a little bit. But it's other than that, I'll be honest, I don't have a fucking problem with this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I really don't.
To me, like,
do you feel the same way?
Okay, well, to me, it's a very well-built game. And the more you dial into each of the individual elements of this game, you'll realize that many of it really connect. Not just into itself and the series' past, but also with Katsura Hashino's past as a director of the game. There are many elements in this game that you can see in many of his earlier works. Like, the setting of the coffee bar is no surprise because that kind of makes you think about Catherine, right? Like that whole moment of Catherine where you're kind of hanging out at that bar and stuff like that.
I remember. I forgot all about that.
And some of the battle elements obviously are taken from like Persona 3 and Persona 4 and its remakes and stuff. But also like all the way back to like Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, going all the way back to that, which was the first one that he's ever directed, and even like Digital Devil Saga. Like it's kind of funny. Like if I don't know if you've ever played those 2 games, have you?
Nocturne a little bit.
How about Digital Devil Saga?
I haven't, but no.
Okay, so in Digital Devil Saga, it's actually interesting because you turn into like this monster and stuff, but also you can turn back into a human. The human can actually fire bullets and gunshots. And the demon, right. And here's the interesting part about this gameplay. You can actually you use status effects and or elemental abilities to cause status effects on people. Like for example, remember in Persona 5 you can cast Bufu and sometimes they'll be encased in ice. Digital Devil Saga actually did that too.
Okay, and then if you do that in Persona 5, I don't know about Digital Devil Saga, but in Persona 5 you freeze someone. Mm-hmm. And actually, you know what? Devil Survivor does this too. Where if you hit him with a physical attack, it'll fucking do massive damage on him. But just a fun fact, in Devil's Survivor, if you freeze them and if you hit them, guess what happens? They can shatter and die right away.
I see. Yeah, so, I mean, but, more so that, this has happened in the past as well. Like, so, for example, in Digital Devil Saga, if somebody is actually, encased in ice, if you physical them, you'd actually crit them automatically. So what I'm trying to say here is that, obviously we know what Katsura Hashino and company are working on right after Persona 5, and that's Project Refantasy, right? They're making a game that is completely different than any games that they've ever made before. But to me, personally, I feel like Persona 5 is Hashino's love letter to the entire Shin Megami Tensei universe.
Oh, it is. It is. A lot, remember, Persona does not have that moniker anymore, right?
Right.
But this felt more like a Shin Megami game than 3 and 4. And I'm not knocking on 3 and 4 because I've been playing 3. I still like 3, portable at least, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I still love, and I think 4 is still a fucking masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
But this one is more SMT than any of those 2 games ever were.
Mm-hmm.
I think. You look a lot of the things about SMT. Let's talk about the battle system for a moment, okay? Because you go back to that first Persona game and you have the option of attacking with a sword or a gun. They brought that back, and that's actually, right. I believe, even going back to like SMT2 on the Super Famicom and stuff like that, or even Megami Tensei from the Famicom. They had the option of gun or sword, and that is true Shin Megami SMT legacy. Wouldn't you agree?
Sure. I mean, if it's been around for that long, I can't imagine that being like like something new, I guess. But I feel like the implementation of it is new, right? Because
right.
That's the thing. It's like, and that's why I feel like it is kind of like this almost like compilation of every single good mechanic that he's experienced building over time, right? And just kind of elaborating on it and finally coming to fruition in Persona 5, because it's almost like as though he knew this was going to be his last Persona / SMT or Devil game, whatever. Because I mean, technically Digital Devil Saga is not even Shin Megami Tensei in Japan, but it's almost like he knew that after this he's going to embark on a completely different project. And and going back to the battle system and stuff, like the biggest addition to the battle system, which is the technical system, I thought that was actually really cool, because now you have to balance whether or not you want to try to technical somebody or you want that extra turn, and that's really, really fucking cool.
And it adds an aesthetic element to the combat. So let me explain what that means, okay? One example was the shatter element, if you get hit, frozen in ice, like, in a game, you get shattered, right?
Sure.
Another element of this is wind and fire don't mix. Wow. So when someone gets burned, what do? You use the wind attack, Garu. You cast Garu on it, and that's a technical.
Right.
Yeah. Or certain status ailments, right?
Right.
Like, I think fear, and if you cast Cyodine, it just fucks you more up, because your mind's not in a good state.
Right.
So, I mean, I think the technical system added aesthetic value to the combat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're talking about just now, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's it's such a simple change, right? Like to the battle system, that it's kind of interesting how as you played the game over time, how much they played around with this concept, especially with how they designed the enemies to behave, and that's, to me, like that's like some of the more interesting things in Persona 5 is that they gave us not only like a really top of the line battle system, but also like some really decently challenging monsters to fight them with. And mind you, like we're talking also monsters that we probably haven't seen even in since, like, again, like the Digital Devil Saga, or even like the Nocturne days, right?
Exactly.
Like some of those personas, or aka demons, actually came back from those, and even some earlier SMT games, which is fucking great and crazy.
I'm gonna say this too. I think for years there's been talk turn-based is dead. Obviously, you and I have thought otherwise, right?
Right.
And I think what this game has cemented, and it's something that I've said about the 2 newer Pokemon games as well, is especially with turn-based, I think with turn-based should have really good presentation. You look at a lot of older games, including older SMT games and Earthbound especially, and oftentimes you see a flat screen with an enemy and then just stats, and then you just see a little slash, and it seems really droll. Wouldn't you agree? But what they did here, and while SMT 3 and 4 have really good presentation, they really fucking amped the presentation in combat and everything, which we'll talk about later. But I think the way the presentation did for a turn-based system can make battles seem more dynamic for a turn-based system. Does that make sense?
Right.
Because I have said this about Pokemon X and Y, and I've said this about Pokemon Sun and Moon. If they did not change that combat system, That presentation, because it's the same combat system. Those games would have just been droll. There's only so much that we can see of two little sprites slashing at each other, right? And I'm not a graphic whore. I can put up with a lot of older games, but where we're at right now, there's no excuse. And Persona 5 may have gone overboard with the presentation, which I don't fucking mind, but that would have been a complaint if the battle system had no depth, which is not the fucking case. So that's what I have to say about that.
So, we talk a lot on this podcast about transitions, to the point where we joke around and stuff about our own transitions from topic to topic on the show itself. But if you really, think about, how you move from one type of gameplay to another in Persona 5, you're right. It is super seamless. Like, if you think about, like, encountering an enemy, hitting him in the back, initiating the fight, getting into the battle system, and then removing yourself out of it by looking at, like, the windscreen, and then jumping directly back into the exploration part, it's as though you never experienced a loading screen, even though, of course, they've hidden the loading all the way in the back outside of these transitions, right? Like in the background.
Exactly.
Some games that recently, to me, like, I've actually demonstrated a really good, or decent at least, like, transition from one gameplay to another is ARMS, actually, recently. I mean, while, there are loading screens in the, like, where it's facing both of your characters, it's showing both of your characters and stuff, it's actually such a short time until it actually loads the level that you can mash through, like, that loading screen, and because, like, the way that they do it is they actually have Biff, the announcer, actually, like, spit out some text to read on the bottom to kind of buy time for you to kind of, like, like, let the level load and stuff like that. But really, you can just mash through that, and then all of a sudden, like, boom, the level's loaded. And even, like, in the online matches, when you're transitioning from, like, the portraits into the battle itself, there's, like, a really cool kind of wipe transition that happens, and then now you're in the battle, picking your arms and stuff. So
right.
I don't, and this is the thing that I want to kind of stress too. Even Witcher 3 has this problem, right? Because they just show you like a loading screen, and it's like, there's many ways that we can kind of make the transition from one area to another in a very kind of seamless way, right? I'm not a game designer, so I can't tell you what the solution is.
Right.
But smarter people than me that are experienced in game design have showed, especially with this game, right, in Persona 5, that is possible.
I've been seeing load screens for 20 years since I got a PlayStation. Maybe even with the SNES, longer than that. I don't think they really had load screens, right? Cartridge games, not real particular.
64 did.
Okay. But ever since I got a PlayStation, I've seen load screens, and I've seen a lot of them.
And to be fair, like, just to add to this, Persona 5 does have its load screens.
It does.
Have it. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. But I've never seen a game that has done load screens, and this is a big fucking deal to me, has done load screens like this fucking game has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, the transitions, not in just the combat, as Alex mentioned, but the transitions from scene to scene are seamless, and it does not feel like the game is loading. I don't know how they did that.
And also, like, when they do load, it feels like that was deliberate, right? Like, it was a deliberate kind of break. Like, for example, after you max out a level 10 romance and stuff, like, it's like it's a transition from, like, a really important event to the next day. So it's almost like every time there's a next day, you do see the black screen, and then you do see your icon on the lower right. But then, in those situations, like I said, when you rank 10, like, a romance, it's not just that they're showing a face on the lower right corner, it's acknowledging what you just did. Like, in that particular case, your character will have hearts popping out of him just to kind of indicate, like, what actually was happening, previously. You know what I mean? It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I agree. It's crazy.
It's thoughtful.
It's very thoughtful. And, we've seen a lot of developers, use techniques, and I'm not cracking on them because, load screens aren't an easy thing to make bearable for anyone, right?
Right.
Let's be honest, to be fair. And one of the biggest techniques that I've seen, and this was especially with BioWare games, I don't know who really started this, was the tip. Remember the tip screen?
Right.
Where you wait and they give you tips to play the game to kind of elevate or give you lore even. I've seen other games.
Sure, yeah. It's something to do while you're waiting, basically.
But Persona 5 does not do any of that. It's just like you said, it's all they do every little thing. It could be a transition to another scene, or one of the interesting loading screens was those interactive ones where you'll see people talking about the Phantom Thieves.
Right.
And you hit X, and then it's another balloon to pop, and another balloon, another balloon. So,
right. One of my favorite transitionary loading screens in Persona 5 is when it's raining and you actually go about doing things in town. You see the tops of umbrellas just moving around like the black screen, and I'm like, man, this is slick as shit right here. This is fucking cool, Oh,
this is just, I mean, I'm going to simply put it, and I know we're not talking about the game as a whole, but this is just one of the many things this game just does outstanding.
Yeah.
Out fucking standing. This is why, I'm just going to say it now. This is one of the reasons why this game is a fucking masterpiece. And I don't say that often.
Yeah.
I say this game's fucking awesome, but I don't say much that a game is a masterpiece, and this game is a masterpiece.
Yeah. Like, it's, one of the things that we should talk about, though, is the confidant system, because that's also something that received a really super huge overhaul, because not only did they just change the name outright because to match the theme of the game itself, because you are technically like, a thief, a criminal, if you will.
Right.
So your confidant system is basically like an adrenaline injected version of the social link system in Persona 4 Golden, and specifically Golden, because in Persona 4 Golden, all your team members had abilities that they kind of gave you, depending on how high you are in the social link level. Like, they would give you different abilities, like they'll shield you from mortal blows, or they'll slap you if you've got a status effect, and so on and so forth. But it was only for party members. So what they did with Persona 5 was, well, why don't we apply it to the entire fucking deck of cards, all the arcana, so that way you had something meaningful for every single, confidant that you started,
Right. And I agree. I agree with you. I mean, this system is, you look at, I've been playing Persona 3. Can I go there for a second?
Sure.
To add to your point? And the awards to the social link systems are still tangible there, where you get some pretty good story. Like, let's be honest, social link stories were pretty good for the most part. And so your reward was more powerful personas and more story. That's great. But in this one, they're like, nope, we're going to give you more than that. We'll still give you a good little side story. We'll still develop a character. We'll still, give you powerful personas. But we're going to fucking make you even more of a badass by hanging out with these people. Like, for example, I'll just say one of the ones that I power leveled up quickly was Sojiro. I mean, Sojiro helped me a lot. Because let's be honest, SP items that restore SP, is it me or not, or are they even more rare in this game than even Persona 3 and 4?
I don't think it's actually more rare. I think it's
okay. I don't know.
It's actually more common, because if you actually level up Akemi, the doctor and stuff, like, you could just buy like SP shit from her quite a bit.
No, I couldn't. I leveled her up all the way to 10.
Interesting. Well, she has other stuff that you can buy.
Yeah, and I got all her items, and I looked for SP items. She didn't have any.
Interesting.
But I got all my SP stuff from Sojiro.
Okay.
And Sojiro, you get the awesome ass Master Coffees, and you get curry, which is great, especially Master Curry.
But if you combo that with Kawakami's, I'll just brew the coffee, or I'll just do the curry for you while you do other shit. I mean, that is OP as fuck.
I know, and I didn't finish her.
Oh,
I don't know
my
why.
God. Yeah,
I will next time, though. I will this playthrough. I will. Because
like I said, before, Kawakami, if you level her up, you go into a dungeon, you go into a Mementos, you get a massage from her, you get your night back. It is the most OP thing ever. Like, especially in a game where they really value time. That one character, that one, I think she's Temperance, right? Like, the Temperance, confidant is the most OP thing in this game. It is absolutely insane. Especially
Agreed.
The stuff that you could do, oh yeah, I got these things that need to be laundried, from Mementos. Let's just pay Kawakami like 5,000 yen to fucking just do the laundry, and we do other shit. I'm like, man, it's crazy.
I want to talk about
time. And here's the thing too. Let me add this. If you actually max out Kawakami, and here's the crazy part: if you actually max her out to rank 10, she stops charging for everything.
Oh fuck! I'm doing that one first. And you know what's cool? In my second playthrough, I have all the stats, the social stats maxed out, so I can level her up quick.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Yeah, I can.
Well, she's story locked, but yeah, like totally like work on her, because like the time that you get from her is absolutely amazing.
And I could probably, with all my stats, max out someone by then. So
yeah, you can actually max her out, I think, before you guys go into that trip to Hawaii.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So what I was gonna say too is one thing I've noticed about this game, and this is from playing Persona 3. So I haven't played 4 in a very, very long time. So just preface this. But one thing I noticed about 3 that I've been playing a lot lately is 3 is so loose with time.
Yeah.
It is so loose. You have so much time to do in that game. You have lots of time, lots more time than in this game.
Right.
And here's just an example. There'll be story sequences that happen in Persona 3. Like, let's have a meeting after school. But then after the meeting after school, you still have the fucking afternoon to go do shit.
Right. And did you, and speaking of which, did you notice that you didn't join any clubs in this game?
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah.
And I think, why that happens? Because of the thematic element of you being an outsider in this game.
I see.
I think that's a big part of it. Because that's what this game is. You look at 3 and 4, and especially, I'll look more at 3 at this point. Because, again, like I said, I haven't played 4 in a long time. But with 3, you kind of are just fitting in more so than you do in this game. You are viewed as a criminal and a delinquent by all your classmates. You're not well liked.
Right.
But in 3 and 4, you're just kind of the new kid. Cool, you're the new kid. Go join this club, join our club, join this. In this one, no one wants anything to do with you. You have to prove yourself to every fucking buddy in this game, except for your fellow outcast. And even then, you kind of have to.
Yeah, you still have to.
Like, I'm thinking, more Ryusuke, but... You
mean Ryuji?
Ryuji, why am I saying Ryusuke?
You, combine 2 different characters there.
I know, Ryuji. He accepts you because he's in the same boat, but Anne, you have to prove yourself. Makoto, you definitely have to prove yourself.
So several months ago... Sorry, am I cutting you off here?
I'm almost done.
Okay.
So what I'm saying about this game is you are an outsider, and I will say this is I always thought 3 was a darker game than 4. I think this is a much darker game.
It is. It absolutely is.
It really is. Playing through 3 is I think 3 comes across darker because of its color scheme, but there's a lot of lighthearted moments.
Yeah.
But this game this is a very dark game.
It's very heavy thematically.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, a lot more so than even 4. And 4 has a lot thematically too, but this one is just dark.
Excuse me, I freaking sneezed there. So to my point though, I wanted to bring back some of the questions that you had for me back when we were playing the game several months ago. And since you brought it up, it actually reminded me, which is, what do I think of Ryuji after all this time? I never really realized who Ryuji was until I actually took a step back and thought of my entire experience with Persona 5, right? If you think about Persona 5 and the main characters and what they were really doing, as well as the aesthetics of the game, including the presentation, transitional, and everything, it gives off a punk rock kind of vibe, right? Like anti-authority, anti-establishment, take down the system kind of feel to it, right?
But yet the music is acid jazz. Let's point that out.
Yeah, okay,
it's jazzy.
That is
the music.
That is a good point.
Yeah. So, but continue. I didn't mean to interject.
That's okay. So I kind of, because I told you before that I was really annoyed with Ryuji because he was just basically going against the grain every single time, right? Until it dawned on me, an epiphany, that Ryuji is the poster child of this entire game. He he is the quintessential punk rocker who doesn't give a shit about authority. In fact, he's so anti-authority that he will go against even you telling him not to fucking yell out the names of the Phantom Thieves, even if you're in a public place, because that's who he is. And that's the moment when I completely did a 180 on his personality, and I said, like, you're a good guy, Ryuji. Don't change.
Yeah, you need that character. Like, you have these kind of, in every Persona game, they kind of have their tropes, right?
Right.
You have Junpei, who's your best friend in 3, and you have Yosuke, who's your best friend, right?
Right.
And they're kind of like, and Ryuji, and they all follow a couple tropes. Like the first main female character kind of yells at them a lot. Chie yelled at Yosuke, Yukari yelled at Junpei a lot,
right.
And same thing with Anne and that, and there's kind of those things, but they're all very different, like Junpei's kind of a klutz, a klutz. He doesn't have an anger problem. He is a bit emotional, but he doesn't, Yosuke is a little bit more laid back than the other two, and Ryuji's just emotional.
Right.
But he fits into that camp, and I always liked the character, and probably a little bit more empathetic because in some ways I'm like Ryuji. I am a total rebel, and that. But I am very anti-authority.
But how do you feel about that, though? Like, do you feel that he was basically like the embodiment of every single piece of value that this game, is exhibiting? Because
I think. Oh, go ahead. My bad.
No. I was just gonna elaborate on that and giving you time to respond. But if you already have an opinion, go right ahead.
I see where you're coming from, but I disagree. I think he's one aspect of rebellion, because there's different elements of rebellion, right? And I think each character embodied that. Ryuji embodied the loudmouth rocker punk type rebellion, right? But you look at someone like Makoto, who in herself is a bit bossy and things like that at times, but she exhibits a more, alternative sort of subtle way of rebelling. Then you have Yosuke. Okay, or Yusuke. Yeah, fucking Yusuke, just Lusuke, who gives a shit? Yusuke, who's the art guy. He's a rebel in his art. You know what I mean? He's the artist rebel. Am I making sense how each one embodies it?
Right. I mean, what you're trying to probably say is that they're an outcast in their own way. But yeah. In terms of and that they have very different ways of fighting back from authority, if you will.
Exactly. And I think I get why you say Ryuji may accompany the whole game, but I think each main character rebels. Look at Futaba, for example, too. She fights it through being an introvert, right? From shutting herself away and doing her own thing.
Right.
Each character encompasses what the game represents. They're all pieces of a larger whole. That's how I look at it.
I agree with you, but if you consider also the art style of how the menus are, and also all the interfaces, right? Who designed the very first card to be given out to their target?
Ryuji.
There you go. So every single thing that you see in on screen is actually based off of the artwork that Ryuji initially created.
That's a good point.
So that's kind of why I'm saying that I feel like he not to say that I'm not saying he's the main character. I'm not saying that at all. But he is basically the model of of rebellion. Because when you think about the most common ways to represent rebellion in modern times, it is the punk culture, right? It's the anti-establishment punk culture, and then of course from there you can kind of see how how the other characters kind of represented different kinds of rebellion as well. And I think that it's good to kind of acknowledge Ryuji as as that kind of character and how influential he is with everything that they got. Because if you really think about it too, during every single piece of conversation where they're about to do things, he's the guy that pumps everybody up. He's the guy that's just fuck yeah, let's do this, and he's the guy who will do things. And especially it's exemplified but by that part where in the last part of the ship level with Shido, where he just fucking ran up the ship so that he can disengage this this lifeboat, and then people, it exploded and stuff, and they made a big deal out of that. And and that's like one of the moments where I'm like, yeah, that's fucking Ryuji. He'll just do whatever the fuck he wants because he knows like he cares about these people in his very in a very different way than most, and it's like I said, like Ryuji's character, and I know we're talking a lot about Ryuji, but again, like I love every single character. Like like one of my favorite characters actually, like in the game, is Futaba. Like her story is fucking, man, that was the feels on that one,
well, the whole fucking game from the beginning, like different kind of feels, right?
Right.
From Kamoshida to, like that first story where you defeat Kamoshida, that sets the tone for how bleak this game is, because it's not directly mentioned, but a running occurrence that happens in this game is rape. Rape happens in this game. I mean, it starts with an attempted rape. Remember, with your character stopping an attempted rape, and then it implies, I guess not really the main villain, but the second antagonist, Shido, his sexual activities are belayed upon, and how he doesn't care about it and how he treats his children like shit and things like that. You know what I mean? So, it gets deep into, the nasty side of sexuality without directly mentioning it.
I think that I feel like that's, as far as the Shido thing goes, I don't think that came across to me at all. Like the things that you said.
It did.
Well, for you, but for me, it didn't. Because one thing that I don't know if you've ever actually noticed this, how many dungeons do we have in the game, for the exception of like the mementos and the, the last boss?
I think 7.
Yeah.
6?
There's 7.
Okay.
There's 7. And if you think about every single person that you fought in every single level, they actually embodied one of the 7 deadly sins.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, because like if you think about like, I'm not going to name all 7 sins, because I actually had a conversation with a friend, and we've kind of confirmed and kind of validated, like, yeah, every single part of this has been, the 7 deadly sins, which brings us up to like the religious aspect of the game at the end, where you fight the Holy Grail, right? And angels, for that matter.
And it's implied in a way you're fighting God. And
yeah. And of course, like, in order to beat God, you basically summon Satan. Like, how did you feel about that? Like, the whole, that, because to me personally, like, I know that this is a long time, this is something that, has been around, like, Shin Megami Tensei for a very long time and stuff, but, like, did it come across as, like, kind of overbearing to you? Did you?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. It didn't, all of it fit towards the end. Let me explain something to you, okay?
Okay.
I'm going to get literary with, okay? There's an idea, and I forgot the exact word. I was watching a interview with Margaret Atwood. You ever heard of her?
Mm-mm.
Okay, she's a famous Canadian author. Right now, she's the kind of the talk of television, because one of her books, The Handmaid's Tale, has been critically acclaimed.
Okay, I've heard of that book.
Yeah. So it's a very popular TV series on Hulu, very critically acclaimed. And she was talking about how people have this idea of God, and I forgot the word she used. There's 2 ideas of God, and how she believes if a God exists, the idea of God of being a spirit, right, is that idea, the spirit where God has no form. Does that make sense?
Sure.
But then there's the idea of God that we've seen through Renaissance, where he's the old man tyrant and stuff like that, which is the idea that of what God is created by man, right? And that God is the tyrannical angels and things like that, right?
Right.
And in the game story, this God, because this is still in the same universe as the other Persona games, so there's other deities, and we don't know what Igor really is. There's supernatural elements. This God was not like Nyx or Inazami. This God was created by mankind's desires.
Right.
So the idea of the tyrannical God that we see in literature, not the spiritual God that we cannot know, this is the tyrant God that mankind created out of, their thoughts and their process without knowingly created. The idea of the collective unconscious, as proposed by Carl Jung, that idea that we're all connected by an unconscious.
Which is the original idea of the Persona series to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. But it really plays upon it more so in this one than in other games. Right?
Right.
So we have this mass idea of God that becomes a physical manifestation that is going to destroy us, right? And he has even the ideas of the 7 sins, because remember, the 7 sins are represented in the final boss too, remember?
Right.
So you have that idea. Let me get a more literary. You know why the devil was used as that? In a lot of literature, the devil is not necessarily the bad guy. He's the trickster. Usually the idea of the devil is he's, don't be evil, he'll go to hell. But if you look at Milton, Paradise Lost, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. The story is God led a rebellion, and Satan is a trickster character in that. You look at stuff like Neil Gaiman's Sandman. Satan is not exactly an evil person, right? Stuff like that. And he's a trickster character who's rebelling against the tyrant. So that's why Satan was used. You are fighting the ultimate tyrant that has been manipulating other tyrants to fuck with your world. That's what it is about.
Mm-hmm.
So bring this full circle. This game is fucking in depth with mythological lore, with biblical lore, with all that. It is ripe. And I'm just scratching the surface, because there's a lot more to say about this game in that sense.
Right.
But I don't know if you agree with that reading of it.
I think that's very accurate. Like, there is a lot of literary basis for a lot of this stuff, and it's just the reason why I posed the question is I do have friends who are, it's kind of interesting actually, when they realized like what was about to happen in the end, they actually stopped playing the game, like, completely.
Why?
Because the idea of summoning Satan to fight God and stuff is kind of, if you're coming from like a very like strong religious standpoint, it's kind of against your beliefs kind of situation.
I understand that. Yeah.
And again, like, like, obviously we completely respect, people's beliefs and whatnot, but to me, like, it's just really fascinating that they went this route. But going, you explaining like the actual literary kind of basis for this decision, it seems like, I mean, it makes total sense, right? Because everything just kind of gels together. And really, like, for the people out there who are listening, think about it. Like, if you have played through like all of Persona 5, think about like the 5 dungeons that you've experienced, right? And really think about like, and maybe it's a fun activity. I don't know. I had fun trying to figure it out, but figure out like what deadly sin actually matched each. It's kind of eye-opening.
Let me pose a question too to you. What is it with a lot of Japanese games and this idea of destroying God? A lot of, and I'm not just talking exclusively SMT games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think there is this idea of them destroying God, the tyrant? I get it from a literary sense, but it is a theme you see over, especially in JRPGs, right?
Yeah.
Especially, my favorite game of all time is rife with this. Xenogears. You kill God in that game. It may not be exactly God, but you destroy the fundamental elements of religion in that game's world. Anything from Takashi. Xenoblade Chronicles even has these elements in it.
I mean, I can't really say much about it, but go right ahead. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
But I'm not just talking about those games, but there's a lot of JRPGs that it's about destroying God or religion. Final Fantasy Tactics, for example, is another one of these.
Mm-hmm. If you also think about like how RPGs are in Japan versus RPGs are in the West. When you talk about the Western RPGs, like sometimes the last bad guy just wants to rule over an area, right? They don't want to necessarily destroy the world, if you will, right?
Right.
But if you look at Japanese like games and stuff in general, it always has to be like a world-ending event. Like it's like the bad guy just wants to fuck up everybody and destroy everything, and I'm like, why? Like it's a crazy idea.
It's. I was reading this in an the writer Lovecraft, right?
Yeah.
There's a sort of, how we have like monotheism and something.
Sure.
There was something called anti-theism. And what that is, it's not theism because, that's belief in no God. But what anti-theism is the God wanting to destroy mankind, which if you read Lovecraft, that's what it is, God's wanting to destroy it. And I think in a way, Japanese games, a lot of JRPGs tackle into this theme of anti-theism, which is crazy. I like when you were talking there and bringing up these ideas, I thought of other games. Grandia 2 is another example of this shit, And I don't mind it because I'm a sucker for these games, but it's a lot of it is about destroying destroying God, or even in some ways destroying religion, or the entrapment religion has on man. And now that I'm at the end of this game, because that thing does not come apparent until you reach the end of this game. I mean, the religious elements, like you get the mythological characters and demons you get,
sure,
but the religious elements just sort of pop up at the end, and they do it in such a fucking way where it's not like, oh, it just happens. Because if you looking back at the game, they've always been there in subtle ways.
Right. My take on this is that, it's something that is permeated across all media, all Japanese media, I feel. Even if if you want to talk about, world-ending stuff, you also should probably consider, thinking about even Power Rangers, even while they don't explicitly say they want to destroy God, obviously it's like some imposing force that basically is a ruling army, right? They rule like a race. Voltron is kind of the same way, right? Evangelion is exactly that,
Yeah.
But so there's always this kind of to me, it's a reflection of the society. And I know that sounds like a really boring answer, but let me elaborate. When I was studying Japanese literature when I was in college, or it's around 2004, 2005, one of the most interesting things that my professor told me is that a lot of literature in Japan were actually affected by the events of World War II. Now, you might think that it's petty that people are still thinking about World War II, but there are many, ethnicities out there that actually, still think about that day because they don't want that to happen again. Well, and especially, if you remember, one of the major things that happened with Japan is they were asked to disband their army. There is no military in Japan that is theirs. There's no national military.
And they're the only country in world history that has actually been hit by a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
Not a test, but they're the only country that has ever been hit by a nuclear weapon. Yeah. That affects it. That will have a massive effect. You got to understand with World War II, there are still scars from that are still there. It's not something you get over because it still affects. The nuclear situation is still dire in this day and age. What we did set off a chain of events, and I'm not trying to get political, but why are we still talking about North Korea and in fear of them? And why are we in a second Cold War? You know what I mean? Same with the Holocaust. That's racial discrimination, and there's still, not as many, but there's still survivors of that. People who went through that shit.
It's important to bring these up because the inspiration for this game is purely political. I don't know if you know this, Anthony, but Hashino actually started making this game in retaliation of what happened in 2011 in the Fukushima nuclear reactor incident. You remember that?
I remember, yeah, I knew this because I remember Persona 5 was a very different game before that. They had planned it. They were planning it while they were developing Catherine, if I remember correctly. Sure. And then when that happened, that changed what the game became totally. I remember reading somewhere that the game was totally different.
Yeah, and one of the things that Hashino said and was really disappointed with was, he was hoping that because of the nuclear event that happened, and mind you, I may be getting the year wrong, so I do apologize.
No, it is 2011.
Okay, good. Excuse me. That, it's really... he was hoping that people would actually really, punish these guys for really being so careless about how they handled the nuclear reactor situation. But the sad reality of it is that nobody, while there was outrage initially when it happened, people stopped caring over time.
Right.
Even the Japanese people and somebody who's actually lived through it, he was kind of surprised and taken aback by just the people's reaction. They stopped caring all of a sudden. And so, in that sense, that was the inspiration for Persona 5. But let's get back to your initial point, though, and apply this to that. If you really think about, what the meaning is of these characters trying to basically, destroy, a god or, an invading force and stuff like that, is it's actually a very universal theme, and this is actually one of the reasons why I don't play a lot of JRPGs, is because I see this theme in every single piece of JRPG out there. It's just how different is the presentation, which is, you unless you fight back, you cannot escape from your fate or destiny.
Right.
That's the whole thing. And the reason why these kind of like, deitic figures are actually used is because what is the ultimate, like declaration of like your destiny or your fate, right? Like if you think in a Christian and Catholic faith, you'll eventually go to heaven if you always do good things. You'll go to hell if you do bad things. Like there's a predestined fate that you already have. And go ahead.
Oh, I just want to say, a lot of people know this. I'm not a fan of religion, but I also am not a fan of, extremism on both ends. There's atheist extremists and there's religious extremists. Just want to clarify that, right?
Sure.
And you know where I stand. You're more, I think we should clarify this. You just don't care about things like that, right? You just don't care. Let's just hit that.
I am knowledgeable about like many different like religions because I did, when I was like in high school, I did take theology and did study some of that stuff. So, but in terms of it, you've always been like, you don't care if God exists or not. That's what you've always. I have no opinion of it.
Yeah, exactly. And me, I'm agnostic because I care a little bit more than Alex, but I also don't care as much as other people do. You know what I mean?
Right.
And agnosticism to me is accepting your human fallibility of not knowing everything, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with not knowing where we came from or anything. Just live your life. Right. But anyway, I think going back to the game though, okay?
Well, first of all, what do you think of my idea as to, like why we see this kind of common theme like just kind of pop up in many Japanese medium,
Well, let's go into a little Japanese history here, okay? Christianity is to this day still not popular up there, right? If you remember a few months back, there was a movie called Silence that came out, directed by Scorsese. And you know what that's about, right?
Refresh my memory.
Okay, so
really quickly.
Two Jesuit priests go to Japan in like the 1600s. Their master vanished, and they find out that he was captured by the Japanese and tortured because he was trying to convert Christianity, which even to this day has not been accepted. Now, it's there, like if you think about it, Christianity is not like, you're not tortured or anything, but you're kind of a social outcast if you practice Christianity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like a famous Japanese figure that we see in a lot of video games, Amakusa. You know Amakusa, right?
Sure.
Amakusa. He's a bad guy in Samurai Showdown, but the real Amakusa was a Christian rebel who led a rebellion and held up in a castle. The castle fell. He was captured and beheaded as a Christian martyr. A lot of people don't know about that. Mm-hmm. So even going further back, Japan is in a way atheistic, but they still have the Shinto religion, if I remember correctly. But a lot of it is atheistic in a way, but not an atheistic in the way like, the Soviet Union was or things like that. They just don't, they're just not a religious people. And Christianity is not viewed in the highest light. So that's why we see such a loose use of Christian themes in these games. If an American RPG did a game where you killed God, there would be a fucking uproar about it. But because it's from Japan, we are I am. I'm even accepting of a Western RPG doing that. But, if you're what I'm saying is we're more accepting because it's from Japan. That's how a lot of people.
So basically, like your rationale is that this is just culturally ingrained in the country's history. So that's why we see a lot of this thematic element actually pop up a lot.
I'll tell you this too, and I could correlate this into fantasy and even games. Look at a lot of the games we played, Western RPGs, right?
Mm-hmm. There's
the bad religion. And there's the good religion, and you never find any secrets about the good religion making them bad. The cleric character in fantasy role playing games is always kindly and healing, whether it's a male or female. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They're the good. Their God is helping and stuff like that. You never find a deep secret about their god or about their church like you do in something like Xenogears. So if you look,
it's that's very true.
So if you look at the way religion is treated in Western RPGs, it's vastly different. It's vastly different because your healer type is always of a positive religious source. The only exception to that, and again, this is not even an American game, I should say American RPGs, not just Western, is The Witcher 3. Because I don't think The Witcher 3 portrays religion exactly positively myself.
Right.
I don't know. You're more familiar with The Witcher 3, so I don't know if you'd agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like as far as like The Witcher 3 is concerned, like they really try to stay in the gray area when it comes to religion and stuff. And you can and that's the thing that the game allows that's really cool is you can formulate your own opinions about it. But while we were talking about that, I was actually thinking about Heavensward in Final Fantasy XIV's first expansion and how they actually portrayed, like basically the congregation, or rather like the Heavens Ward, which is basically like the knights that serve like the Archbishop of Ishgard. And that's really fascinating is that's another example of the Japanese's, although like this isn't they're not deifying them obviously, but like it's almost close to it. It's almost like a pseudo god-like kind of representation, right? With the primals. Like in this case, like they're worshiping like this image of this archbishop's really, 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 really old, like, ancestor who did this thing that basically like forced them to found Ishgard, right? Like because of the Dragon Song War. So they've almost created it and turned it into a holy war, right, against the dragons. And to me, like it's so prevalent. Like I didn't even realize. I mean, I guess I did realize it, but like I just thought of like Final Fantasy 14, and I was like, man, it's there too.
Yeah, and look at the portrayal of that church, right? It's very like almost Constantine-ish, almost medieval Catholic, right?
Yeah.
Because again, we all know this. I haven't beaten Heavensward, but I've gotten far enough to see how that church is treated. You got the big pope, and you got the the knights and all that. It's very medieval Catholicism, and in a lot of the portrayals in religion that I've mentioned in other JRPGs, they don't go that realistic as Heavensward did.
Yeah.
Like at Xenogears, it's all, there's one church hiding another church, hiding a secret empire that no one knows about. It's really weird stuff like that.
Yeah. But so let's cycle back to Persona 5, because I think that, people are like, wait, what? Religious talk? What the fuck's going on?
Well, it needs to be had, I think, and we had a good discussion.
Yeah. I mean, it's no surprise that that's going to happen anyway, because Persona 5 is brimming with both political and and religious kind of, iconography and imagery, right? Like it's part of the DNA of that game. So it is really difficult to kind of talk about certain aspects of the game and so just kind of brushing those aside,
I want to there's something I need to address too. Let me address the political part, and I'm going to tread very carefully here, okay? Because political talk, we don't do that on this show, and we're not going to do it here, but I think I need to clarify something for some people. I have seen a lot of people saying that Persona 5 was made in response to the Trump administration. That's bullshit, because let me explain. Yeah, a lot of people, and I can see maybe you can relate it in a slight way to the Trump administration, but I don't think it's a commentary on it. I know it's not, because one, the game came out here in April 2017 after the election. The game's been completed for a long time.
Since September of 2016.
Yep, which was 2 months before the election, and when we thought the other candidate was going to win, correct?
Sure. I mean, then, like, they weren't, and even then, like I said, like, the inspiration of this was the Fukushima accident, but a lot of the elements that are contained in the game are actually mimicking a lot of the things that do happen in Japan. It's crazy that, like, if you look at Okumura, right, like how Big Bang Burger, like how he treats his employees, right, that is actually what's going on in Japan right now. That's not something that the developers just made because, oh, well, that would be really controversial. No, it's actually the truth. I have a friend in Japan who works 90-hour weeks traveling about like 2 to 3 hours via bullet train from like Tokyo to like wherever he works. It's kind of insane, you know? Some of the issues at school where, you know, like the weird popularity stuff that happens there, you know, with Kamoshida, the political climate with Shido, that's all real. It's not like they're not using real names, but what's really crazy is there's this one article that I read where, you know, like this guy who basically has been living in Japan, you know, for a while, this expat, he basically wrote into this online site and talked about how Shido's actual poster on the ship actually horrifically almost mirrors like the campaign ads that were going on at the time in Japan, you know, with one of the presidential or the prime minister candidates or however thing of office.
So it's a commentary on Japan. Let's clarify that.
Yes,
not on the Trump administration.
No, it's this whole game is a commentary on Japan. Obviously, like when Anthony said, you could totally apply it to every single thing, right? As with most media, you read a book, you can apply it to your own life or anything else. But the fact of the matter is, that was it is and was meant to be like a commentary on where they live, which I feel like if you want to make a statement and you want to go out with a bang with the series, again, like what better way to do it than actually like make a statement through a game, you know? I
also feel that I've learned from not only this game, but the other two Persona games, 3 and 4, not so much 1 and 2 because they're so different, but I think 3, 4, and 5. And again, I don't know Japan, but I you know, I've never been there. I just don't know Japan as well as I should by making the statement, but I feel I've learned a lot about Japan culture from these games.
Right. I think more so with Persona 5, because I think that, you know, I love that they forced you to go and do train connections, like, you know, by controlling your character, and going through like Shibuya Station and just seeing like, you know, like the Shibuya crossing and all that stuff. It's kind of crazy because I still remember when my girlfriend, you know, when I watched my girlfriend play it, she was kind of overwhelmed with so many different things. And I, you know, and in a way, like I kind of told her like, well, that's kind of like how I experienced in Japan. Everybody is moving. Everybody's always moving forward. But in terms of how much crowd there is and stuff, I mean, just be glad that people can walk through you in Persona 5 and not have to like go around people, which is, yeah, that's the thing. You're right, though. You can learn a lot about Japan just by playing this one game. It's kind of nuts.
Oh, man, there's a lot to talk about in this game. We have it. I mean, we would be here for like 6 hours doing so because this is a heavy game.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, this is a game that I feel like we're, you know, probably going to continue talking about like over time and stuff in many different ways because, you know, in terms of like societal effect, I mean, it's sold a lot, you know, like it's in terms of like how people perceive things. It obviously remains to be seen if people are actually encouraged by, you know, like the hero's actions and stuff like that. But for me, like Persona 5, as it boils down to me, like, and I'll restate what I said in the beginning, it is Katsura Hashino's love letter to every single person who has trusted him to make like a game, because this is probably his best work. And now that he's embarking on a brand new project in a very unfamiliar territory, like all eyes are on him to deliver. So,
and this elevates the status of the series. This series is not just niche.
Mm-hmm.
It's sold very well. This is AAA status. I don't care what you bro shooter fanboys say about it being too anime. This is the AAA title now. I'm sorry, but it is.
I don't think it's quite AAA, but it did sell quite a bit of copies.
It's going to get there. This series is in the mainstream though, because look at the attention it got. Remember at E3, okay, the Sony press conference.
Mm-hmm.
He mentioned the most important PlayStation games released this year.
Mm-hmm.
And Persona 5 was mentioned in that list. I'm going to say simply, Persona 5 is one of the greatest games ever made. Not just one of the greatest RPGs ever made.
Mm-hmm.
Not just one of the greatest, you know, Japanese games. It's period. Hands down, without a fact, in my mind, one of the greatest games ever fucking made, period. It might even be the best game in the Persona series, in my opinion. Hands down. I think so too. And that says a lot because Persona 4 is still in my top 10 list. Persona 3 is still my top 10 list, but this is probably not only in my top 10 games of all time. This is in my top 5 games of all time.
Nice.
And I think it's moving Chrono Trigger from number 3 to 4.
Ooh.
I hate to say that.
Wow.
I love Chrono Trigger. That game is a masterpiece too. But this game is a masterpiece.
It moves the JRPG forward.
It does. And not only that, but the fact of the matter, I'm going to reiterate, one of the greatest games ever made. It's perfect in almost every way, except for the little camera angle. But other than that, I never felt tedious, bored, or anything. The only reason it took me forever was because I had things in my personal life that disrupted me. And as I've explained to Alex, this was one of those games. If I sit down and play it, I will not stop for hours. And I just had more important things to do than playing Persona 5. That's a fact.
Right.
But again, I will say 5 out of 5. And I would not be surprised. I don't think anything's going to beat this as my game of the year.
Wow.
It's my game of the year. Fact.
Okay.
Fact.
Yes.
Well, I don't know if you feel as strongly, but
I have mixed emotions about this game because it is a well-built game. Like, everything fits together in terms of, like, the storytelling, the characters, and all that stuff. For me, it is a 5 out of 5, but I'll give you this caveat. Like, you are very into a lot of these, like, really dark storylines and stuff like that, but I'm not.
That's true. That's a good point.
So, while I am giving, like, this definitely a 5 out of 5 because it is a fantastic game, beginning to end. There's a reason why my girlfriend and I are playing through the game a second time, right? Like, right. The mechanics are really engaging. The storyline is engaging. We can talk many, many hours about each of the different characters and stuff. But there's also the question of the thematic elements and stuff. And for me, that's the thing that bugs me because it is a highly oppressive game to the point where it is a highly oppressive game. It's almost to the point of, like, BioShock oppressiveness in some ways, where you play that game and you're just like, man, I don't know if I want to get back to it. Obviously, the answer is, yeah, we need to get back to it. But, like, in terms of, like, let's play it again in about 6 months, not quite sure, that's something that I'm going to do, But that said,
right.
I think that, it has to be restated over and over again. This is Hashino's love letter to all the JRPG fans out there, and this is frankly, like, the best JRPG to have come out in a very, very long time.
And I play a lot of modern JRPGs, and I can even say that.
Oh yeah, the quality of Persona 5 versus everybody else, there's not even a medium part. Everybody is just below this game. There's nothing that comes close. I'm sorry, even Final Fantasy 15 doesn't even come close to where this game is at.
I agree. I am not. I still like a lot of those lesser JRPGs, I guess you could call them. And I'm still planning on tackling Tales of Berseria, but man, this game, again, you and I are only differing on an aesthetic level. It's because you like more lighter heart stuff. I like darker stuff. But again, this is my game of the year. I know probably Horizon Zero Dawn is yours. Maybe not. I don't know. But
I like that you just waited the whole time. You're like, maybe, right?
Is it your
right?
So far?
I can't tell you that.
Okay.
Saying what's the suspense in that? If, like, we just say it now unless, like,
I'm saying it now because I have to say it now. Nothing's gonna come across close to this game for a long time for me. Until
the rumored, like, Persona 5 Crimson comes out.
Yeah, because I did give Golden a game of the year after I gave Persona 4 the original game of the year. So,
that's funny. Yeah.
So, but you know what? Let me just reiterate: if it does what Persona 4 Golden did to Persona 4, and it does it to this game, holy fuck, Alex! I mean, we are in for a treat.
I'm just really sad that we won't see Hashino's project for another 3 or 4 or 5 years. Because
fantasy?
Yeah, because I think because the thing that he's doing for that game seems to be so out of the box, and even, like, looking at the early artwork, it you can see it's Sojima's, like, artwork, But man, it looks so different, and it already feels so different from Persona that it's really exciting. And
it's going to be awesome.
And I can feel like that he's really excited to pursue this and stuff. So,
and I mean, well, if we wait a decade for Persona 6, cool. But if we get another awesome game from him, why the fuck not, right?
Yeah. Well, he's not making Persona 6.
Someone else. You know what, though? I have a feeling they will pump out Persona 6 sooner.
I think we'll see Crimson, and I'll tell you why. That team that he left, he needs to actually make their own Persona game before they can embark on a new one.
So what is the rumor about Crimson?
Crimson is a patent that was filed by Atlas, so it's P5C. So nobody knows what it's all about, except that people have figured out it's Crimson because guess what? That's the color red, and they did Golden, which is kind of yellowish, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know.
But like
at least it's not Fess or S or Cess.
Yeah, but that's kind of obviously nobody's talking about it, but it's in people's minds that they are going to release some sort of game like that. It's going to probably be easier than Persona 5, but that said, if you can't wait for that, this game is pretty fucking awesome. You should go get it. So, yeah. All right. Well, we've exhausted every single conversation topic in Persona 5 that we can muster up today. So, what we want you guys to do is, if you guys want to talk about or elaborate on some of the things that we have mentioned today, and maybe tell us, how you guys are doing with Persona 5 if you are playing through the game, or you finished it and going through like New Game Plus, send an email, podcast@mybacklogbattle.tv. It's a fantastic email address. Or even post on, the Facebook group or something. But be careful of spoilers on the Facebook group. So if you want us to read it, spoilerific and everything, just email us at podcast@mybacklogbattle.tv. Save the spoilers for the emails and stuff. And we'll talk about them in a future show. And, maybe even closer to, Game of the Year when we start deliberating games again. So I think it'll be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I'm down. Yep. This was fun.
And also, just to kind of reiterate, you can go to our Facebook group. It is Backlog Battle Podcast Community. So if you search for that on your little search bar on Facebook, you'll find us, hit the join button, and we'll approve you. No problem. There's a lot of gamers out there who want to talk video games with you. Even if you feel like, if you're like the biggest fan of Choaniki Big Brother, like I'm pretty damn sure somebody is going to reply and say, fuck yeah, Choaniki, that is the best game ever.
You and Choaniki, my God, ever since I fucking met you. Oh, my Lord.
Yeah.
Ever since I fucking met you and Choaniki, you're a homosexual schmuck.
It's not homosexual. They just have a lot of protein.
Lie to yourself.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, have a great rest of your week. We'll see you guys later, and happy gaming. Thanks for listening to the Backlog Battle Podcast. Don't forget to email us at podcast@mybacklogbattle.tv if you've got any questions, comments, or suggestions from today's show. You can find Anthony on Twitter at twitter.com/magusx1 and on YouTube at youtube.com/magusx1. You can find me on Twitter at twitter.com/mybacklogbattle or on Facebook at facebook.com/mybacklogbattle. The intro and outro song is credited to Laszlo and is titled Imaginary Friends. It is available everywhere where music is sold. On behalf of Anthony, this is Alex saying take care and enjoy your week.